This insane HOA story just got a huge new update, and I'm going to include the whole saga here so you don't miss out. Get ready. Vindictive ex-wife illegally signed application to the local HOA in my name. Check out this video in podcast form by searching Austin Stories wherever you listen, or check the video description for a link. I'll start this off by saying my ex is vindictive as heck. We've been fully divorced since about right before the pandemic started. We sold the house we shared, and I didn't have to pay her alimony because she cheated and we're in an at-fault state. It was as messy since D-Day. All of the stereotypes. First, the sobbing, and then the trickle truth saying, "I love you. It was just one time. Okay, it was 2 years." And then the gaslighting followed by, "I'm gonna take you for everything," before packing her crap and walking out. I feel like I never really knew the woman my ex was in all the time we were together. We were married 5 years and together for 7. And in 2 of those 5 married years, she had affairs with 3 other men. The final one being a foreign businessman out of some sort from what I could figure out. Yes, I got tested for STDs and was thankfully negative. Yes, she got pregnant by the final affair partner, and no, I didn't sign the birth certificate because I found out about all the affairs before the baby was born, thanks to a call from the first affair partner. My ex tried to go full scorched earth on me. But since we live in and were married in an at-fault state, she lost. We didn't pay equally into our house, and the equity was divided 70-30. So I got a pretty good cash payout when I sold our marital home to put as a down payment on a different house closer to my job. It's a bit of a downgrade, but suits a single guy in his 30s like me just fine. My ex did show up to my house once, but I refused to let her in. She barked and complained at me that I'd financially ruined her in the divorce. I said that if she was fully willing to do that to me first, and the witch had the audacity to say it should have been my life screwed over and not hers. I laughed so hard and said it was karma. She yelled that she'd sue me for what was rightfully hers. I said if she was going to sue me, then to go ahead and sue me. It'd end up the same way in court because she had nothing but a false sob story. She was the cheater, not me. I'm no angel, but I didn't do anything to her. And then she was the one who ruined our marriage. She then said that she'd tell everyone she could that I abused her, and I said that I'd sue her for defamation if she did. And I was recording our interaction and had those words saved to my phone. She went wide-eyed and her jaw dropped. The look people are calling the surprised Pikachu face was this. Then I asked why she was there, if not to just try and make trouble, because she had a new man in her life that knocked her up. She just huffed at me and said he isn't around much, and she's stuck in a tiny apartment living off his child support till he comes back. It was immature of me, I know, but I did the bit of playing the world's smallest violin. She yelled at me to go screw myself, and then I yelled back that I'd sooner do that than her anytime. She raged at me and then got in her car to leave. I haven't seen her since. There's an HOA in my neighborhood, but I was not legally obligated to join it because the last owner of my house was not a member. I made sure of that through a real estate lawyer as well. The HOA had no grounds to force me to join, and they were not happy about it. The HOA president would show up with forms every week for the first month demanding that I sign them. Then she threatened to take me to court, to which I had to get a cease and desist sent to her from my lawyer to make her stop that. So she started harassing me by looking for any infractions that she possibly could to report me to the city. An inspector came out several times and found nothing wrong. In fact, I offered one of them a burger while grilling, and they graciously accepted. Did I mention the HOA hates barbecues and parties that aren't approved in advance? Well, they do. And I like to grill when the weather's good. And my neighbors actually love me for it because I invite them over. I had the police called on me several times for noise complaints because I was playing music on a Saturday afternoon while having my friends over. The HOA president I caught trespassing once when she was trying to peer into my windows. I called the police, but she denied ever doing it. So I got cameras. She hasn't trespassed since, but I still got repeated passive-aggressive letters saying that my cameras were not an approved addition to my house. Some months ago, I started getting letters for fines in the mail, and when I contacted the HOA, their representative claimed that they had it on record that I joined and needed to pay all the fees effective immediately. I told them that that was not possible. And then they emailed a scanned copy of the forms and they had a signature on them. But it was not mine. It was very similar in some ways, and I recognized right away as being my ex's handwriting. She knew what my signature looked like, but it was a loose imitation at best. I got in touch with a lawyer right away over the forged signature, but the HOA still demanded to go to court, and it took 7 months before that happened. Meanwhile, they were stacking unpaid fines against me weekly, and they were threatening to put a lien on my house. We went to court and the HOA president looked very smug, but my lawyer pointed out how the signature wasn't the same as mine and was very inconsistent in the various forms. I'd never allowed the HOA president in my house, and I never requested the forms. The idiot HOA president actually slammed her palm on the table and said it was still binding. But when pressed where the fraudulent signature came from, she admitted my ex-wife called the HOA and they sent her the forms, then got them back in the mail signed. But then she actually claimed she thought that I'd signed them. The judge looked at her and asked if she was serious, and she confirmed she was. The judge then asked how a woman I was no longer married to, that had never even lived with me in my current residence, was supposed to have any bearing on whether or not I joined her HOA. She went quiet, and I could see the "oh crap" look on her face as the hamster wheels were turning and she seemed to finally mentally put the pieces together. My lawyer then counterclaimed that what the HOA did was blatant fraud and legal actions must be taken. And they were. I countersued the HOA for the emotional distress of the harassment I've gotten since moving in, which I had lots of proof of. That won me about 10 grand after lawyer fees that I decided to put toward my mortgage. The HOA president was removed from her throne. I like to think she was kicking and screaming. She was also slapped with a hefty fine. I've seen her outside a few times, and she always looks at me like I'm the devil. The HOA itself had to pay all of my legal fees too. I wanted to go after my ex for forging my signature, but I can't because not long after she forged my signature on those forms, she apparently left the country to be with her third affair partner. She's somewhere in Europe from what I can see of the final post on her Facebook before she disappeared. So I can't do anything against her unless she ever returns to the US. So that was a wash. I'm not getting letters from the HOA anymore though, and the new president has promised to keep things completely cordial from now on. I still don't feel like I got much of a win in this though. Other than the $10,000 payout, it all felt like a huge waste of time.
The juicy update. So I figured that she'd left for good. However, her affair partner who'd knocked her up eventually kicked her and their kid out. And then they came back to the US after my ex begged her parents to buy them tickets home. I guess the affair partner just wanted her as a side piece that he could toss out like a used doll once he was done with her. I kinda don't blame him for kicking her out because she's evil, but at the same time, he booted out his own kid too. If that's what he intended to do from the start, then he's just one of the worst kinds of people. The fraud case was obviously still open against my ex, and she got arrested not long after coming back into the country because her passport was flagged, and the police were there to arrest her on landing. When I finally saw her in court, she looked very different. She'd put on weight, she couldn't dye her hair or cake her face in makeup anymore, and there was just this aura of defeat about her. Not long after she was arrested, her parents showed up at my house and pleaded with me to drop any charges that I could, and then even had the audacity to ask me to take my ex back. Of course I refused, but it was in one ear and out the other with them. I visited my ex at jail only once because her parents hounded me for weeks, and she put on the same kind of pitiful, "I love you, feel sorry for me" act as when I first confronted her with evidence of her infidelity. I told her that she couldn't be serious after the crap that she pulled. She never really loved me. She cheated on me with 3 men that I knew of and possibly more. She got pregnant by another man and had no remorse about how she destroyed our marriage. And then she maliciously tried to defame me. And she illegally signed me up for an HOA by forging my signature. And for the cherry on top, she ran away to another country like the pathetic, cowardly bee she is. And she somehow hoped that I would take her back after all of that. Well, that was enough to make her see that she had zero chance of manipulating me. Even if heck froze over, I'd not take this woman back in any way. Her parents also couldn't really argue with my reasoning, other than repeatedly saying that she's their only daughter and the mother of their only grandchild. Her mother kept crying that my ex could change. I said, hey, she can change without me. I'm done with her. And then they tried the stupidest thing yet. They told me that my ex and I were still married in the eyes of God, and that I have to help her because it's a Christian thing to do. I asked them what the Bible said about infidelity if they were going to bring religion into it, and they shut up. I then slammed the door in their faces, and they hounded me till I called police on them, and then I got my lawyer to send a cease and desist to my ex's parents to stop trying to contact me, or I'd file charges against them too. That finally stopped them. But I do kind of wonder if they'll try to pursue child support from the father of my ex's kid, since they're stuck raising them now. If that's even possible. What with, the father being in a different country and all, and, well, he's on the move a lot from what I've heard. My ex could not be bailed out of jail by her parents because she was denied that option since already being guilty of fleeing once. And even if she did have a set bail, I bet it would have been so high that there's no way her parents could have paid it. My ex originally pled not guilty, but I think her lawyer convinced her to change it to guilty for a lesser sentence. Only problem for her was the judge presiding over the trial was a real hard butt. And they charged my ex with felony fraud for forging my signature and mailing it, as well as knowingly fleeing the country to avoid charges. She got hit with a decent sentence of nearly a decade behind bars, no parole. By the time she gets out of prison, she'll be 42 years old. She broke down sobbing on the floor and had to be dragged out. I won't miss her. I think justice was served. I wasn't ecstatic about it or anything because I'd emotionally moved on from that woman long ago, and I've become happier because I've been dating a great woman for the past 6 months. She's a single mom and works as a clerk. Honestly, I already think I love her more than I ever did my ex. Her son seems to like me a lot too. His own dad is someone I haven't heard great things about. And if you're still wondering about that HOA, they've kept their promise and left me alone. But I've heard that behind closed doors, the old board that were all inevitably replaced hate my guts because I basically started their downfall. Yes, the entire board was eventually replaced, and the new board are running things far better now. Fines nearly stopped, monthly dues were lowered, several rules were removed from the CC&Rs, and the street has been a happier place for a year now. Now, if you do check the Bible, divorce is frowned upon as a no-no. However, if there's abuse or adultery, ask a pastor, then yeah, things are different. What would have you done? HOA story time. Try to sneak a foreclosure? Lose my business and everyone else's. Check out this video in podcast form by searching Austin Stories wherever you listen, or check the video description for a link. For anyone who's ever served on an HOA board, you know that most of the violations, accounting, and general management of an HOA, especially with a neighborhood of the size I run, is handled by a property management company. This is mainly because it would be too expensive and biased to have someone who lives in the community handle all of these duties alone. A dirty little secret of these companies, however, that many of these companies will make their prices cheaper by secretly passing fining policies onto the homeowners that the board has no control over. Hence today's story. So about a month ago, we were conducting a regular HOA meeting. We have been having them fairly often to keep our board, management company rep, and homeowners in sync since I've been hearing complaints of bad behavior from the management company. This particular meeting, however, things almost got out of control. As soon as we finished all of our checklist items, we asked homeowners about any questions. A couple stood up, and I saw the man holding a paper with a shaking hand, which I quickly learned was due to his anger. Over the next 10 minutes, he explained how he was here to plead his case for the board not to foreclose on his house, especially since he had been making payments on a large debt for a very long time. Without going into too many details, the discussion got extremely heated because our management company had told us not to get involved since this homeowner had already been involved with our lawyers. After lots of arguing, the meeting was finally over. I left totally confused because I knew that the homeowner was in good standing, and if he was willing to pay, which the record showed he had called to do so, why couldn't he? I had been told by my property manager to not take any action, and I decided to call BS. I called the legal firm representing the board, which I was told not to do, even though they represent us, and after talking with the firm for an hour, I found out that the management company had not allowed this homeowner to pay his fines and dues because of a petty procedural technicality, and that, instead, they were slapping fines on him like there was no tomorrow. I quickly told the lawyer to offer to settle his balance with no fines, and the issue was resolved the next day. Revenge. I spent more time looking into our management company and found out that they would underbid management contract costs and supplement them by adding in their own fines onto the homeowner collections without the board's approval. This is a technicality in the fining process, and while it's not illegal, it is highly unethical and disputable because it encourages the management company to fine and escalate non-issues since, well, to make more money. I honestly felt horrendous because I had no idea, because it's a one-line clause in the contract. I also received a call from our community manager urging us to stop waiving fines since it sets a bad example. That really sent me over the edge. Livid with this phone call and new knowledge about fines, I found a new management company and terminated our contract immediately. In addition, I believe I found a loophole where all of the charges unfairly pressed against homeowners will not be recouped by the company, and the HOA cannot be liable for them since they are passed through. During the issue with the property investment company, I met about a dozen other HOA board members in my area and discovered about 6 of them are using the same company and even community manager. I urged them to look into the same issues, and they soon discovered the horrors for themselves. It sounds like all of them will be terminating their contracts too. One of the other association presidents actually knows state council for HOA rules, and they are now working with them to make this practice illegal. If it passes, this entire company would go under. While I'm not holding my breath, I am certainly following the legal proceedings closely and have even offered to testify before a committee why this rule is needed. It sounds like deliberations begin in January. As for the community manager, the person helping our community, they have lost over half of their contracts, and their manager came begging for me to stay. They even offered to stop the fining policy in the most corporate talk way possible, while they basically gave themselves plausible deniability if they do it again. I told him that his property manager deserved what she had coming to her, and that their policies were stone cold terrible. He tried to reply, but I just hung up. I was too angry. Watch these management companies closely. They are almost all seriously snakes in the grass, waiting to screw over board members and community members. Do you agree with this? I'm suspecting the community manager is getting a cut of the fines. Would be a good idea to check on any other fines issued. Yeah, there might be some under-the-table nastiness going on here. What would you do?
If you want to get cool badges and see some videos early while supporting me in the channel, click the join button to become a member. Thanks. HOA story time. To be fair, I knew of the HOA before I bought the house. When I first moved in, the HOA was pretty much non-existent. Then, 2 of 3 board members quit, and we didn't get the 60% of the votes for new members, so the one appoints 2 people on the board.
They ended up selling 4 acres of land that was behind people's houses to the property owners for next to nothing, with no vote from HOA members. The value of 4 acres in my area is worth well over $100,000, and guess what? One homeowner that benefits from the free land is related to the new president. We have no public land now. The only upkeep is the front entrance that they don't maintain. Our dues are not a lot. It was $50, now $60 a year, mostly used to cut grass on vacant lots that they sold. There is a drain pond that, for the first years that I lived, they claimed that the pond was deeded to one guy, so they never maintained it. But now, all of a sudden, they are paying to maintain it. Guess what? Another family member of the president lives on the pond. The president is trying to change wording in the bylaws to add fines and more wording. I called them out on it at the next meeting, and they said that they don't need to vote on it because they are changing rules, not amendments. One rule change in wording was about garbage can placement because before it stated that it's not in front of your house. Now it states that you have to buy an enclosure or keep cans in the backyard or in the garage. Another change was about sheds, which stated that if you needed a permit from the city, the board has to approve it. They are going after people that built in January of 2021 and after only. The HOA was formed in 2017. Those are the only 2 things they will fine for out of all the bylaws. This president is my neighbor, and both issues affect me. Now everyone wants to vote on garbage can placement. We have enough votes by proxy to do it, and the president said no proxy. It has to be in person only, at a meeting. That'll take 98 homeowners to show up, which he knows won't happen. I keep calling him out on his bullcrap, but it just doesn't stop. Looks like we'll just have to move. I don't have time or energy to fight this control freak. This is why we need checks and balances to make sure that people can't just rise to power and just take care of everything and abuse it all. What would have you done? Try and sue us after screwing up? Get fired instead. When my second year of university rolled around, I was living with 3 other friends in a property that we rented through a letting agency, which had a ridiculous pun for a name, but go off, and the house was initially perfectly fine. We moved in at the beginning of August and had no problems for a while. When they asked early on whether we wanted to sign a contract for next year, we said sure, and signed a new contract in November due to start the next academic year. We know this was a screw-up in hindsight, but we really didn't think we'd have serious issues. However, when it started getting colder in the winter months after a mild autumn, we realized that our boiler was absolutely god-awful. It would fail about once a week, barely heat the radiators, and wouldn't heat rooms. It would need repressurizing each time it died. Being students and not too wise about renting, we just put up with this at first, dutifully emailing the agents every time it broke and waited for them to send someone out. In the meantime, the busted boiler meant that the hot water was dodgy, sometimes cutting out, and that the house was freezing. And, as such, the monthly utility bills were through the roof. One was almost 1.5 times that month's rent. Since the boiler was essentially now a very expensive kettle and we needed office heaters on almost constantly so we didn't get frostbite. We could constantly see our breath and practically needed to be fully dressed to sleep. This caused issues. Constant colds for one guy, mold growing in the bathroom since we didn't ventilate well as to not lose the little heat the house did retain, and being able to dry our clothes. We didn't have a tumble dryer, just a clothes horse. We were fed up and decided that we wanted out of this new contract. Because we went through an agency, we had no direct contact with the landlord. Every query and contact was through the agents. This is important to remember for later. The agents, while very polite over the phone and in person, were flaky and bad at fixing problems, and it took months for them to send a gas man over. And even then, it was just to renew safety certs, and he didn't even do his job right. So a couple of weeks later, another guy was called out when it broke again. The landlord even comes for this visit just to make sure there's no more screw-ups, and this is our first time meeting her. She was a bit of a soccer mom type, but she seemed to be sorting it, and the issue was kind of fixed, as well as an ancient boiler that really needed replacing could be fixed. This was the last time that we talked to them directly. Through the whole process, my parents had been helping us document things. My mom being a solicitor and my dad a landlord himself, so they knew their stuff. They were grumbling about the agents from the start, but for us, it was easier to just put up with most of the BS since the university work was stressful enough without all of this. Taking the offhand advice given to us by the agents at the beginning of the tenancy, we kept great records and pictures of every document, email, and letters that we received, and took pictures of problems and work being carried out for record keeping. We eventually figured that they'd try and shaft us in some form sooner or later, so evidence was needed. We emailed them over the break officially saying that we wanted out of next year's tenancy. They were amicable and said that if we could get someone else to take it, sure, but were very adamant that if we didn't, we had to keep paying rent for that contract. We have house viewings and we advertise for months, but we get nowhere. At this point, tensions are rising and my mom has taken our challenge as a personal hobby to sort out legally. Since we had initially tried to be low-maintenance tenants and deal with small issues, our contract stated that any issues related to the property needed to be sorted by the landlords or the agents, just in case that we caused further damage trying to do repairs. We instead decided to do exactly what our contract said. We emailed them constantly about every tiny issue that we had, from a broken light bulb to a frosty letter flap. We knew our contracts front to back, the local laws around renting, and asked the university about student renting for specific detail. Getting permission to change a light bulb became a bit of an inside joke to us at this point. Hey, how many working days is it going to take to change it this time? 3 to 5, it's Friday night. We then made sure that we complied with every single thing that they asked us to do in order to leave this new contract, like advertise, accommodate all viewings, keep them updated about anyone who was interested, and so on. We went above and beyond trying to get some poor suckers to take this house off of our hands. We emailed constantly through this for a paper trail, and we made sure that we could document this entire thing. It was stressful, but my parents assured us that things would work out, and knowing that we were annoying them as much as they annoyed us helped. When we move out at the end of the first tenancy and hand our keys in with explicit letters saying that we were not returning for the next contract, we waited for crap to hit the fan. A few weeks later, while I'm on holiday, we all get emails forwarded from the landlord via the agents saying that unless we immediately found new tenants or agreed to stay on, they'd sue us. Scare tactics pretty much. This was also the first time that we'd had an email directly forwarded from the landlord, since usually the agents just passed on any info and so on in their own words. The landlord said they'd had no notification saying that we wanted out of the new tenancy, that this was out of the blue, and therefore they weren't able to advertise for new tenants. So we dutifully sent them a large email with screenshots and pictures of email notifications of house viewings, emails about potential takers, the original emails about us not wanting to take the contract with the date 6 months beforehand clearly highlighted. And then we waited. After a quiet period, we got an almost sullen-sounding email saying that they would drop it if we paid 4 months' rent from the new contract, since although there was an error in communication, we still did not fulfill our end and provide replacement tenants. So out rolls another long email with photos of everything the agents had screwed up, including the dodgy gas man visit. Came to learn what he did was illegal and potentially dangerous, and it was the agent's job to make sure he did his job right. The fact that the new contract signing was botched in the first place due to the agent's error, and one of our housemates had bought a laser thermometer to document how cold the rooms were, sometimes as low as 8 Celsius or 45 Fahrenheit, and had taken pictures of readings, so there was a heavy implication that the house was not suitable for habitation during that time. We haven't received a single email since that, and when the bus goes past the house recently, I see that the letting sign has been changed to a different company, and the house is no longer available through the original agency. So they got fired by the landlords for screwing up so much. I feel smug every time I go past. Is this not just textbook malicious compliance? You gotta do what we say? Okay, we're going to do it, and we win in the end. What would have you done? HOA doing nothing about homeless guy in the dumpster. I live in California, currently living in a condominium where I have an HOA. My condominium has a few businesses on the first floor, therefore we have some public parking and a dumpster area that's accessible next to our private parking. The dumpster area was originally locked, but homeless people kept breaking into them. As a result, the HOA removed the doors, hoping that the lack of doors would deter them away due to the lack of privacy, but it's gotten worse since. It started off with one man, but now it's at least 3 different homeless men that keep frequenting the dumpster area, making it to be an absolute filth. 2 of these homeless men randomly yell, hit the dumpster, and so on. It smells disgusting, and you can definitely smell it passing by. Either way, I live on the 2nd floor and keep getting woken up multiple times during the week by one of the homeless guys just banging the dumpster. My unit is right next to the dumpster chute, so I have the privilege of hearing these men late at night and very early in the mornings. I've complained to my HOA and called the cops more than once. It temporarily gets handled, but it never lasts more than 1 week and they keep coming back. I've no idea what to do. And just today, one of these homeless guys zoomed into the private parking area on a bike, which is gated, after a car exited the parking area. There's a delay for the gate to close. I honestly am starting to feel increasingly concerned for my safety and those of my neighbors. What if this guy hurts someone or breaks into a car that's in our private parking? I'm at a loss. Is there any action I can take to get my HOA to do something? I'm almost ready to sell my condo and move out, but I wonder if I'm going to be at a disadvantage. I was able to get a great interest rate on my mortgage during COVID, and I don't want to lose it all over this. Yeah, an HOA is supposed to have the homeowner's back. I've seen cities actually make benches that are difficult to lay on for this situation, and that's a really rough way to handle things. What would you do about this?
Crazy Homeowners Association enforcer gets a taste of her own medicine.
Check out this video in podcast form by searching Austin Stories wherever you listen, or check the video description for a link.
I'm house sitting at the moment for my cousin. He and his boyfriend lived in a pretty swanky neighborhood full of McMansions. Nothing too fancy, just your common upper middle class suburban development. Anyhow, over the past few weeks, they've been having a new porch installed on the back of the house. The crew has a trailer parked out front so they can lock up their tools at night. No big deal, right? Apparently, it is. This evening, I get a knock on the door. I'm always wary of solicitors, so I make it a point to look out the window before answering the door. After hearing the doorbell, it takes me a minute to get to the window. As I look outside, I see a woman walking away with 2 little dogs. One of the dogs stops and proceeds to mess on my cousin's lawn. I wait until the dog is done and open the door. By this time, the woman is beginning to walk away, but she sees me and turns around. She introduces herself as a board member of the HOA, or as we know, Homeowners Association. She looks very annoyed. Without even taking a breath, she launches into a lecture about the trailer parked out front, how she's lucky to have walked by and caught this egregious violation of the HOA rules, and how the trailer is an eyesore on the neighborhood. She says she won't report me to the board and suggests a fine if I remove it immediately. I calmly inform her about the patio construction and how the crew needs to store their tools and materials at night, but she's absolutely foaming at the mouth about how tacky it is to have a trailer in front of the house, and again, it's against the rules. So I calmly inform her that I am not the homeowner nor the owner of the trailer. Well, and there isn't much that I can do about it, especially at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday night. Nevertheless, she's adamant that I do something. By this point, I am just fed up with this woman, who obviously has nothing better to do with her evening than bother her neighbors with bullcrap. I look at her and just casually ask, hey, just out of curiosity, what's the fine for not picking up after your dog if it messes in someone's lawn? I tell ya, the look on her face at that point was classic. She stuttered for a minute before telling me that she would have to look into that. And I told her I'd be grateful if she did, because my cousin has been suspecting a neighbor of letting their dog mess in his lawn, so he set up a video camera in the window to catch the culprit. Upon hearing that, she got a little flustered and told me to tell the patio crew to hurry up, and then she walked away with a huff.
If you want to get cool badges and see some videos early while supporting me in the channel, click the join button to become a member. Thanks.
My landlord lied to the HOA about having renters with an update.
My husband, daughter, and I just moved to a nice suburb area of a large city from a town about 3 hours away. We found our rental house on Zillow and fell in love with it. We arranged a meeting right away with the landlord, who was very eager to have us as her tenants. Things were going well until issue number 1 came up. We have a golden retriever. She said that her last tenant's dog had done a lot of damage to the property, and in order to rent to us, she needed a $3,000 refundable pet deposit. After debating on whether we should pay such a large sum, we agreed because we don't have very good credit and we have an eviction from 2015. So the amount paid to the landlord prior to moving in was $2,400 first month's rent, $2,400 deposit, $3,000 pet deposit. That's $7,800 in total. She also required proof of pet vaccination, flea medicine, and renter's insurance prior to moving in. We were aware of the HOA, but the landlord didn't speak much about it, nor was it in the lease. Our assumption was that the HOA fees were handled by the landlord, since they weren't discussed. This is our first time in a neighborhood with an HOA, so we moved into the house on September 30th of this year. Things were going well until issue number 2. I tried to sign up for the trash service today, and I called the local trash company, and they informed us that the account was set up through the HOA. The trash company told me to call the HOA to set it up and gave me a phone number to call. I had questions about lawn care and where to pick up our mail anyway, so I called and left a message with the phone number provided where I stated my name, my new address, and the phone number, and then mentioned that I was a new tenant seeking information. The lady at the HOA immediately called our landlord after receiving my message and told her that the HOA prohibits renters and we need to leave immediately. The landlord attempted to lie and say that we are her roommates and that she told us to say the same if they call. That obviously isn't going to work, and we are expected to move out right away. We told the landlord that we would leave, but we would need a few days to pack up our stuff and find somewhere else to live. We also told her that we expect a full refund since our contract was signed under false pretenses of no fault of our own. She told us that if we do not move out in 48 hours, that she will be prorating our refund because she shouldn't be expected to pay our bills. My questions are, what options do we have as renters with a 12-month lease? How can we get our money back from the landlord? And can we report the landlord to the HOA for past renters as well and any future ones? Here's the update. We haven't spoken with our landlord since she agreed to give us our money back in full. But, as someone mentioned, we will try to get that agreement in writing. We found another house already, and we plan on moving into the new one tomorrow. We've taken pictures and videos of the house. Since we have only been in the house for 5 days, everything is in the exact same condition that it was when we moved in. This entitled Karen tries to get their car out of the tow lot for free. So this story has the entitled man, the man's girl, and a coworker. So this happened a few days ago while I was working security at my local tow lot for my company. This couple came in within minutes of the lobby opening. Karen said, "Hello, can we get some service here?" Even though the lobby just opened, and they walked right up to the help window used by parking enforcement to dispute tickets. So I kindly walk up and tell them, "Hey, I am sorry, but this particular window isn't used by tow lot staff, but window 1 is open." At this point, I get death flared at by the guy, and I simply walk back to my spot to monitor the lobby. The couple go to window 1, and it goes relatively well. I was more paying attention to a pair of teenagers to make sure that they don't do anything when I hear the man yell, "What the heck are you saying? We want our car and you're holding it hostage." At this point, I begin to move close, just in case. Her car shouldn't have been towed in the first place. She has no tickets. Coworker says, "Sir, the vehicle in question was towed for blocking an alleyway." There was snow on both sides and we weren't blocking crap. I can understand that, sir, but your car wouldn't have been towed if it wasn't blocking the alleyway. Even partially blocking is subject to towing. The girl says, "Honey, let's just get out of here. There's no point arguing." "No, screw that. These jerks stole our car," he says. So I cough to get their attention. "Sir, there are children in the lobby. I'm going to have to ask you to stop swearing and calm down." The entitled man-child Karen turned to me and he tried, and I just say tried, to intimidate me. What the heck did you just say? Now, let me just put this in here. I personally stand 6 feet 2 inches tall, and this man was around 5'6", and I made sure to train myself so I'm ready for anything. This guy looked ready to snap. So I leaned down to look him in the eye. I asked you to stop swearing and to keep your voice down. You're not the only one in here this morning. Man-child Karen at least listened for a little bit until they got to the price. Coworker said, "Okay, Mr. Karen, that will be this huge amount of money." Okay. So both the man-child and the man's girl had their eyes wide in disbelief. Are you kidding me? First you steal my car, now you're telling me that I have to pay? My coworker, being super chill, nods and adds, "Sir, you do realize this is a tow lot, not a parking lot. Your vehicle, well, it was towed and it was issued a fine. That's the reason for the payment." At this point, the man's girl seemed to give up and turned to leave. "Come on, honey, let's go. We'll pay it when we can." Entitled man-child Karen didn't even look to be happy at all and slammed his hand on the window between him and the coworker. "You're freaking lucky this window's here, jerk. You stole the wrong man's car." By the time his hand hit the window, I was making a beeline to him to escort him out, when this man-child Karen turned and angrily walked off, saying, "I hope you love being on the news, because I'm calling Fox to investigate this place and I'm suing." Since then, I haven't seen any news crew nor lawyers in the lot. At this point, I'm just glad the cops didn't have to get sent to our tow lot again. Oh, that guy was so embarrassed and he did not handle himself very well at all. What a tough guy, right? What would have you done?
Karen is entitled to my driveway.
I had a late class in university and needed to head out around 4 p.m. to make it out on time. I had returned from walking my dog at about 3 p.m. only to find a car parked across the front of my driveway. The car was on the road, but fully blocked my entire driveway, which means that there was no way for me to back out of my garage. My house was on a small cul-de-sac in one of those massive cookie-cutter communities. It wasn't a main street, and there was absolutely no way anyone could have mistaken it for a parking spot. I say, "Excuse me, ladies, do either of you happen to know who this car belongs to?" Entitled neighbor Karen just gives me a stink eye and then turns back to the entitled Karen to keep talking. "That's my car." "Well, would you please move it? You're blocking my driveway." "I'm almost done. I'll move it when I leave." She turns back to her conversation and proceeds to ignore me. I'm annoyed at this point, but I needed to take a shower anyway, so I headed inside to get ready to go. I was ready at about 3:45 p.m. and I got in my car, opened the garage door, proceeded to start backing out when the car is still blocking my driveway. I stopped, got out, and sure enough, the two Karens are still having their Karen conversation. "Ladies, I asked you earlier to please move your car. You are blocking my driveway." "Don't you interrupt. Grown-ups are talking." I'm surprised by the outburst, and I'm confused about why this is an issue in the first place. "I asked you nearly an hour ago. This is not your driveway. You are illegally parked, and I need you to move immediately." "We are adults, and you are interrupting. I'll move when I'm good and ready. Stop being rude and mind your place." I am fairly patient, but that's about run out at this point. I start screaming and yelling expletives. I tell her to get her crap box away from my car and get her fat butt out of my way. It took a good 5 minutes of sustained screaming for her to just basically give up on continuing her conversation. She moved her car more to get me to shut up than because she actually thought she had any need to move. "You know, you should be ashamed of yourself. This is not how you talk to adults. Show some respect." Other Karen chimed in, "Really, behavior like this is just not acceptable." "Shut up, Karens. You're allowed your hippo friends here to block my driveway. I was courteous and asked you nicely to move. I could have just called the police and have them deal with you. But you jerks responded like I was the bad guy for asking you and your friends to stop trespassing on my property." I finally headed off to school. The part about this that I found so utterly insane was that 1, I am not a child, 2, I owned that house, and 3, what was the issue with moving the car in the first place? Some people I just don't get. Yeah, I mean, honestly, what's so hard about saying like, "Hey, you need to move, I own this driveway," and just actually doing that thing? I just don't get it sometimes. What have you done? A Karen trespassed on our family property and got booted out. This just happened about an hour ago. I was just cooking some chicken for lunch on my George Foreman grill when my mother came knocking on my front door. She told me that my aunt had just caught a woman trespassing on her property. When confronted, the woman held out her phone and claimed that she was using her GPS to come and see the waterfall. We have no waterfalls in our area, and she was not on any road for a GPS to work on, so bullcrap was called on that. This woman walked down a driveway that was over a quarter-mile long, past my parents' house, my grandparents' house, and then went down to my aunt and uncle's house. What's more, we have no trespassing signs everywhere, but she blatantly ignored them. We then caught the woman as she was walking back up the driveway. My mother tore into her and called her out, and my stepfather had his double-barreled shotgun and told her not to come back. But this Karen nonchalantly brushed us off and tried to play ignorant the whole time. And then my aunt came driving up and we practically had her surrounded in every direction but the road. So she walked up the road and turned onto a nearby street. My roommate and I both recognized her as a woman that we saw walking along the road recently. We live out in the hills in Oregon country. You don't usually see people walking along our street as the nearest sidewalk is like 8 miles away. So most people out here drive. We're all of the theory that this woman may have been scouting out our property because we've had thieves and addicts in the area do that before. And a few years ago, some trespassers vandalized our property. There's even a literal MJ farm next door. So right now, we're on guard in case she or anyone trespasses, looking for anything to steal later. Update: my sister has been asking around and the lady who trespassed on our property has been spotted around the neighborhood and has some people keeping a close eye on her. But thus far, no one knows who she is or where she lives. I'd be watching closely, keeping me and my family safe, everybody coming together as a family unit to help each other out. What would have you done? HOA wants me to build a shorter fence? Got it. My professor told me this story. He was a very, very private person, the sort of guy who would hesitate to tell you his favorite color if you hadn't known him long enough. He had recently had an incredibly nosy couple move in next door and realized that the flimsy 4-foot fence that he'd got for the dog would not keep out peeping eyes. So he installed a fence. But instead of using a standard size, which he knew his neighbors would peer over, he built an 8-foot fence. It wasn't even a week before the HOA was on his butt, threatening every fine that they could and claiming that he couldn't have a fence over 6 feet tall. So, being a dutiful citizen, he called the fence company to uninstall said fence. While the fence was being taken down, he closely examined the HOA handbook on the precise definition of a fence. He installed a new 6-foot fence that fit every single regulation, but with a 3-foot brick wall beneath it. I mean, what's the HOA going to say? He followed the rules by the book. He just added an extra foot when they wanted less. How would have you handled this? HOA Karen put a lien on my house, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you find out what happens to that HOA, and I'll see you there.